So what is up, guys? Nick here, helping you to master your technology. So you've got an iPhone 13 Pro Max and you might be thinking, should I upgrade this baby to the iPhone 16 Pro Max? Apple's been pushing the 16 Pro Max for well over 7 months now. So this has been on the market for quite some time. But is it really worth it? Like, is it really worth doing the upgrade when you have that feeling that my phone works and feels fine in the iPhone 13 Pro Max, but you still might be tempted by the shiny new iPhone 16 Pro Max, or you might be waiting for the upcoming 17 series. But in this video, I'm going to give you the real deal. No fluff, no marketing jargon. Let's just dive in and just see, is the 16 Pro Max actually worth the upgrade over the 13 Pro Max? Stick around because I think some of the things you're going to learn in this video might surprise you. Alright, so let's go ahead and begin with the design of the iPhone 13 Pro Max. It did house stainless steel, glass back, textured back as well, just like some of the prior versions. But it already felt like a premium phone, right? But when you pick up the iPhone 16 Pro Max, it does feel definitely a bit more refined. You'll find it to feel smoother, lighter, kind of giving you that big but light feel as well. It's a more polished finish. Let's just put it point blank. It just straight up is. But honestly, the size difference is not very huge. So if you have an iPhone 13 Pro Max, you're not really jumping up that much in size. And if you have smaller hands, you might find the iPhone 16 Pro Max even more bulky to hold and use versus your 13 Pro Max. Not so much in the weight, but the actual size. Now, the reduction in the bezels also made this a little bit harder to reach side to side, because it's just, yeah, we have less bezels, which I love, and don't get me wrong, I don't want to go backwards, but it does make it a little bit harder to reach side to side on this phone. So it does give a more bulky feel. But generally, I would say when I dig deeper, they're not really groundbreakingly different. Let's just be honest. They really aren't. So when we take a look at the sides here, you will see they're basically similar. We do have the upgrade to the action button versus a silent switch. And yes, those shiny edges do get greasy and gross on the iPhone 13 Pro Max. You also do have yourself a camera control button and a 5G antenna on the 13 Pro Max, which looks the same, but the power button's in the same location. At the bottom, you'll see that they do have essentially the same look, just one is Lightning port, the other is USB-C. But I do really miss my SIM card slot on the iPhone 13 Pro Max. Probably the last best iPhone yet, just because it has that SIM card slot. But overall, if you look, we still have a triple camera on the back, glass back. The back of these phones, it's just mostly a design refresh. Kind of like when you have one of those vehicles that they don't change things that much, but then they just change like a light bulb design on the back or a rear light design, but it still generally has the same shape. That's where we're at right here with these two. All right, so let's move on to talking about the displays. So both of these are definitely some killer displays right here. They are both Retina XDR OLED panels. The 13 Pro Max still has a great screen. Don't get it wrong. It really does. Those bezels are quite noticeable now, but where the 16 Pro Max tends to shine is you can see that clear reduction in bezels, but it's brighter outdoors, significantly so. So if you do want a phone that you can easily see outdoors, it gets harder to say don't upgrade. You definitely should for this area, because while I'm not sure, I'm in studio lighting, this thing can really crank up. So it's something that I do really appreciate. And it's not just limited to this phone. A lot of phones this year do have that benefit. That's one of the newer benefits of some of the newer and later phones on the market today. But here's the kicker. When you're indoors, when you're not outdoors in the sunlight and you're watching some movies, playing some games, you know the drill. These phones are not very noticeably different. So you can barely even tell or make it out when you do have decent lighting. So that's really the main thing. It just really depends on the scenario you find yourself in more often. If you find yourself outdoors more frequently, I do think it's just a slight upgrade. for the iPhone 16 Pro Max if you're indoors. But if you do tend to upgrade, or you do tend to be outdoors a lot and you need that to crank that up, I do think the 13 Pro Max is definitely behind. So really depends on you and what you're doing when you go outside. Now, both of them do have ProMotion, which are smooth 120 hertz panels, which is really nice, honestly, on both of them. They are super smooth to scroll through the software, and they really give you an amazing experience. This was the first one to bring it, the iPhone 13 Pro Max, and it's been buttery smooth since. I knew at that time it was great, but unless you're an absolute screen geek, oh, I just dropped my headphones, hold on. Unless you're an absolute screen geek, you're probably not going to really feel a massive difference when swiping through things on these phones. They're just basically the same thing. So yeah, that's how I feel about the displays here. I would go with the 16 Pro Max mostly on the sole basis of them reduced bezels are beautiful, giving you a larger screen with not a much larger body, but that outdoor brightness is really great. It really is. Now, when it comes to the performance, I've done speed tests on these before, but I will say generally what you're going to find yourself in here is hard to see differences, because when you open applications, yeah, the 16 Pro Max will launch a little bit quicker. It does have the A18 Pro chip. This one does have the older A15 chip. So this one is a bit older in that department, but it still does a really good job nonetheless. Now, both of them are extremely powerful processors, and they both tend to really can be able to handle quite a bit you throw at them. However, I will say that the iPhone 13 Pro Max definitely needs a little bit more RAM. So if you did want more RAM, that you can generally open more apps and keep more things open in the background for your 16 Pro Max. Like I can have multiple things open, and when I go back through them, they tend to hold open a little bit longer. Versus on here, I might get a couple of applications that just relaunch sometimes, but it's just very rare. So the performance differences here are just not that serious unless you're doing some intense tasks. You probably wouldn't even notice a massive difference here. So next up is battery life. Now, we want a phone that will last all day, correct? Am I wrong? Let me know, but I'm pretty sure you do want a phone that lasts all day. Now, the 16 Pro Max has pushed that to the next level of lasting fully all day. That's pretty obvious. But you get a bigger battery, more efficient chipset. But what I found in the real world test is that with a typical day of use, when we're going through some social media, when we're playing some games here and there, when I'm watching some videos, both can make it through a full day without needing a charge. But there is one caveat. The iPhone 16 Pro Max gave me more juice when doing this, and I actually was finishing with some ridiculous like 50 to 60% battery at the end of the day, stuff like that. So if you just need a little bit more extra juice, the 16 Pro Max is definitely one you'll want to upgrade to here in 2025. Is definitely something worthy of doing. But let's be real. How heavy of a user are you? Are you constantly on your phone all day? The 13 Pro Max still works fine. It's great for the casual user or a heavier user. You'll barely notice the difference for just casual use. But if you are a heavy user, you will clearly notice this difference. So I think that decision comes down to one thing and one thing only. How heavy of a user are you? You know yourself better than I do. If you are a heavy user, the upgrade is worth it. Now the camera. This is where the 16 Pro Max really gets a big update. We do have a camera control button, which is a big change from your iPhone 13 Pro Max. People will say, oh, it's not a big deal. We didn't even ask for that or whatever. The bottom line is that it feels like a different experience. But this one actually gives you more detail in certain situations, specifically at nighttime, low light performance. It's significantly better than the iPhone 13 Pro Max. It also gives you significantly longer zoom. 15 times is really small zoom here in 2025. Not for a casual user, but for someone who wants to like really push that zooming ability. The iPhone 16 Pro Max definitely does a good job here. Now, the video performance is good on both. However, the 16 Pro Max can now do 4K at 120. So if you are looking to get some super slow motion, ridiculous footage, you'll really like this. But what's nice about the iPhone 13 Pro Max is that this phone can still shoot at 4K 60. So this one still gives me high-end video, and it still looks better than a lot of Android phones that come out today. So I think the 13 Pro Max is a fantastic deal still. It does cinematic video, portrait mode, and it just has the works. It has the things that you really like about the iPhone camera. The core essentials are still baked into the iPhone 13 Pro Max. So I just feel like the 16 Pro Max is a luxury at this point in terms of those extra camera features. They're not necessarily needed, but they're nice to haves for sure. And they definitely command its price tag, especially if that's your main area, the camera. So I haven't updated this to 18.4.1 because it's just not my main iPhone anymore. So I'll get to it after this video. But this means that you do have the latest updates still over here. And you can see if you learn more, this was a pretty big one. And it comes here to this phone. Now you can see when you tend to read the update notes, they tend to really been focusing on updates for the newer phones. You'll see Apple Intelligence based phones. So this phone doesn't have Apple Intelligence, which means you're not going to get a lot of what Apple's focusing on with these updates. Although you'll still get your photo updates, you'll still get some bug fixes, Apple CarPlay updates, stuff of that sort, some language updates. You'll get your typical security risk updates. Those things are going to come in. And of course, you're going to get the major OS update as well, iOS 19, probably lacking Apple Intelligence once again, though. So because it doesn't have the RAM to support it. So you're pretty much getting the same software experience, but lacking the new Siri, lacking the Apple Intelligence. And if that is something that you want to use, Playground, you want to use a ChatGPT extension that goes with this, you want to generate images, you want to use the rewrite tools, you are definitely a little bit behind there. Well, you could argue a lot behind if you use those things. If you don't, then it's basically a gimmick you don't need to think about or talk about much anymore. So I will say that generally though, I think a lot of users are just using the core iOS experience. So I don't think the Apple Intelligence just yet is a game changer for the majority, but it's on its way. It's just not quite there, but it's on its way. Now let's talk money. The 13 Pro Max, you're not going to get much more than a few hundred, maybe $400 or $500 for this. If you have a higher storage tier, you might get $500, $600, but you're not getting a substantial amount anymore for this phone. It's still better resale value than a lot of the Android competitors at this point. But honestly, you're not missing out much from the iPhone 16 Pro Max when it comes to the core iOS experience. You're definitely not missing out much in terms of the screen size, for sure. You are missing out on better brightness outdoors, Apple Intelligence, a smoother, polished feel. That is something, it just feels like not as game changing though. As like when the 13 Pro Max came out, it just felt so much nicer than like an 11 Pro Max. But this difference is not, to me, as big. But definitely, unless you absolutely need the latest and greatest, you would probably be better off saving a bit and sticking with the 13 Pro Max until September, as I do think we might be seeing a much bigger change. However, they do have enough upgrades from these two if you wanted to make it that upgrade, it wouldn't be a bad idea. It's just the 16 Pro Max is a 3-year refinement, polished version of the 13 Pro Max, and that was an amazing phone itself. So if you're asking your question, should you upgrade? I would say if you didn't upgrade at this point, like we're already this far, I would say just probably hold on and see what comes. The 16 Pro Max is a great phone, don't get me wrong. If you don't care about the latest and greatest features though, you might be okay. This still is worth it if you can get a good sale on this, and then get this cheaper is definitely worth it. But I would say at this point, we're probably just better off if you have a 13 Pro Max, seeing what comes with the 17. But if you need a phone now, this one cracks, it breaks, the battery's giving you trouble, and you don't want to do a battery replacement, you just want to upgrade your phone, you want to sell this off, make some cash on it, reduce the cost, the 16 Pro Max is an excellent deal still. Not at the full retail though, it's pretty high though. Let's just be real. In the end, it's still a great phone, the 13 Pro Max. So Let me know your thoughts on this comparison down below. Did you find it helpful, entertaining, informing, enjoying? And which phone do you want to go with next if you have a 13 Pro Max? Very curious to see. And are you buying the 16 Pro Max going into summer? Are you ready for this one? Are you doing an upgrade? Let us know down below in the comments. If you found this video helpful, entertaining, informing, do me a favor, click the like button for me. Subscribe if you haven't already. Nick here, and I will catch you all in the very next episode. Thank you very much for watching. Be sure to be well, and peace.